Hello and welcome to this edition of the ILO's Future of Work podcast. I'm Sophie Fisher. These are uncertain times. Inflation has returned. The shoots of post-COVID recovery are under threat, and we're told that the global economy faces its biggest test since the Second World War. To face these problems, we're going to need innovative solutions. One option attracting attention is the so-called social and solidarity economy. In fact, it'll be a subject of a discussion at this year's International Labour Conference in Geneva. The social and solidarity economy is sometimes described as a third sector, neither private or public sector enterprises, but an approach in which economic activities and projects are founded on the principle of solidarity. One of the better known forms of the solidarity economy activity is the cooperative. These are enterprises that are owned, governed and run by their members. Joining me today is Nadine Mouawad. Nadine is co-founder of the Dicken Consumer Cooperative in Beirut, Lebanon. Nadine, welcome to the Future of Work podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot for joining us. Tell me first of all, how did you get interested in co-ops? It's an old model, but seems to be having a new revival.
I actually got interested in cooperatives as an alternative to NGO organizing because I started off in the feminist movement, organizing either informal collectives or formal non-governmental organizations. And we noticed that NGOs kind of fit into the global capitalist order in that you have to rely on external funding. There's all sorts of labor relations between the owners of the NGO and the staffing and the employees and the volunteering. So it didn't really live up to our goal of reimagining economic alternatives. And so we started exploring the cooperative model as a basis for organizing around 2013, and we had an active feminist cooperative that pooled resources to have a shared space, shared resources. And that was when we started really this exercise of understanding how people can organize together on an economic basis for their economic interests to achieve a goal that they cannot do individually, and independently as well, that you can make decisions that are not tied to funders or banks or landlords or any of these factors. And that's where we really started to explore the importance of cooperatives in a vast array of understand. I don't think there's a single perfect model of cooperation under this economic order we live in, especially in small tiny countries like Lebanon. But any attempt to challenge forms of organizing that are oppressive in and of themselves is needed now more than ever, I think.
So tell me, how exactly does Dicken work then?
So we've had an economic crisis since 2019, not very unsimilar to most crises that have happened in Greece or Argentina. Our banking sector has collapsed. Food security is a major problem now with the hyperinflation, and also with the build of our economy is one where everything is imported more or less, including our food. And so we needed to think of how can we help each other buy food sustainably without or not only relying on aid packages, because that's what happened during COVID and with the hyperinflation and the crisis. So all of the activist community sort of went towards these food packages. So we would pack food into boxes and we'd go deliver them to people without a job or unemployed or struggling. And I was part of these efforts, and something about this aid model didn't quite resonate with me. I didn't find that it built actual class solidarity like we wanted to. It didn't solve the problem more sustainably. It kind of was a band-aid solution. And so me and a bunch of people who were working in aid at the time decided to try and open a store, a regular grocery store that would provide food at cost price for people. So we would go buy in bulk, and folks would pay a membership fee and join the cooperative and be able to buy all of their needs at bulk prices, so much cheaper than the market.
So you basically handle food, is that right? And other domestic items like cleaning products and so forth?
Yes, exactly. It's a food cooperative, exactly.
And you buy the supplies for the cooperative on the commercial market, or do you buy those directly from individual suppliers, farmers and so forth?
Mm. That's a really good question, because our hope is that we can buy directly from farmers and directly from other cooperatives. The challenges now infrastructurally in Lebanon are tremendous, meaning that it's either an electricity crisis or a fuel crisis. We used to have suppliers that are far away from Beirut we used to go to, but then with the fuel crisis, those prices became a lot more expensive. There's a lot of new products in the market that are much cheaper, but the quality is not up to standards of the members. To deliver from regions like the mountains or villages also is kind of costly. So we've been working out custom solutions here and there to be able to achieve this goal, but our main challenge is that there is a lack of infrastructure in the country that supports cooperatives, that provides connections, logistics operations, that can compete really with the corruption that happens in the food sector among supermarkets and traders. It's very hard to be a single cooperative in any space. No, the whole point is that, yeah.
Hmm. I was going to say, it sounds like, I mean, you can't, for example, benefit from the economies of scale that supermarkets usually say they can benefit from. So how do you manage to keep your prices low?
Exactly. So we've tried our best to keep the prices through getting bulk deals, through working with particular suppliers, through hunting for suppliers, always. Now the folks working at the Dicken have made tremendous effort to hook up with farmers and other co-ops. There's been a lot of initiatives since the start of the crisis, as you can imagine, in this kind of solidarity economy space. And we're getting much better at it. We're getting much better than when we first started, because it's been a learning experience. I mean, it's not hasn't been easy, because a lot of the shortcomings we couldn't foresee. But now that we've gone through a lot of these iterations, we've kind of stabilized. It's been about a year and a half now, and the model is doing well, but it still needs several years. And we've had some visits from folks in Geneva and Paris and London. People who run consumer co-ops have passed by and visited Beirut. They come over and they always tell us it's going to take you 3 to 4 years until you can sustain. But our goal is to eventually have the membership fees cover the bulk of the operations while paying fair salaries to people working there. And that's a huge challenge.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, I mean, what do you pay the people who work in the cooperative? Do you pay them the standard wage for the job, or are you working on volunteers?
No, we pay everyone who works there, and we've tried to pay, because our currency crisis is that our local currency, the lira, devaluates every other month. Now we're in a free fall. The Lebanese lira has lost a lot of its value, at least 20 times its value. So we try to keep our payments in dollars to the workers so that they're not affected by what happens in the currency. But the bulk of our membership pays in Lebanese lira. And so we've asked folks to support us, folks who can earn better wages, to pay in dollars their membership fees, so that it sort of balances out. So the hope that we've got enough people paying in dollars and enough people paying in Lebanese pounds, so that it can kind of balance it out.
And what about to your farmers and direct suppliers? Are you paying them in dollars, or are you paying them in lira? I mean, can you match the prices that they get from the bigger supermarket chains?
Matching the supermarket chains is challenging, because what the big chains do is that they increase their profit margins on fancy products and decrease their profit margins on the basic necessities. So that's why they can offer bulk prices or discounts or special offers that our size doesn't quite allow us to do. And the future of where we see this project going is that either we have to open several points of sale, so several similar decants, or we have to try and find suppliers that are local, that have good prices, that would also be part of a networking initiative, that can be part of a cycle of economy where the benefits are for both of us. But all the local pricing happens in Lebanese liras, and this has also been a major challenge, is that the prices change every day almost. So when we first started, I remember we put in so many hours putting price labels on the food items, and then it would change every day. We'd have to eventually we stopped putting price labels on the items, and this is the case for any grocery, any sort of business in the country because of the fluctuation of the Lebanese lira. So it's an economic exercise, but it's also a community building exercise. No, the goal is for enough people to have an interest and a stake in this food cooperative that they can make also um, decisions on how it's run and where it sources from, and that there's a collective intelligence that's trying to solve these problems.
So it's more than you see yourself as offering more than simply low prices to people who have very few financial resources. It's more than that, is it?
It has to be for sure. I mean, that alone doesn't constitute a cooperative. There's a necessary element of governance, decision making, and collaboration that we was a bit harder for us to get going because we had to understand the business model first, and that took a lot of time. And because of COVID restrictions, it wasn't easy to call for meetings or to visit people or to have collective discussions. But that's also something that we're getting better at gradually now. And we've survived thanks to the help of organizations that work in agriculture or aid or development. We've sourced little amounts of funding because we didn't want to get into the funding cycle, because I think once you get into it, it's very hard for you to get out. But we've sourced a lot of donations, a lot of technical support. There's an organization in Lebanon called Mada Association that gave us accounting support, accounting software. When we started, it was like paper pen kind of thing. Helped us buy a barcode reader, helped us buy, that instrument that measures the weight of groceries. So we've been trying to get technical support here and there, but there's still quite a long way for us to go.
Before you're an economically sustainable entity.
Yes, and before we have proper decision making systems in place that really engage the members beyond what you mentioned, which is the financial benefit.
Do you think? I mean, I can see that a cooperative model is an attractive proposition, particularly in economies that are fragile or beset by crises for whatever reason. But the in those circumstances, particularly when you have the kind of currency fluctuations that you have described, whereby you're paying out in a harder currency and getting money in a softer one, I wonder to what extent the model does actually function.
Um, well, 2 points about that. One is I don't see what other choice we have but to try. And I don't see a better vehicle to try than through cooperatives. Because what you have now in this situation you've described is a booming of NGOs, of aid, sort of humanitarian kind of organization, distribution of food, donation based, and that doesn't build solidarity. It doesn't build a future where we come out of this crisis stronger or with stronger institutions that kind of can sustain
Mm.
no matter what happens. Because I don't know, yani, we're today is a very difficult moment in the country. There's lots of strikes happening. I think there's going to be a return to protest. I think But it's in these difficult circumstances we have to organize collectively. We have no other choice. We have to sort of depend on each other. We have to make decisions together. It is of no value for people to make individual decisions. How do I manage in this crisis? It has to be, how do we manage in this crisis? But of course, it's a huge financial challenge. And you ask questions about
Mm,
what do you compromise? How do you make it happen? We can see the steps that we need to take. We can see how to get there, but also it's been emotionally a very difficult period for most of us. Exhaustion, frustration, depression. It hasn't been easy. There's been a massive immigration of folks leaving. It's a challenge to get through your daily life and also to try and build collectively. But there's no other option than to do this.
mm. I mean, it is true that what you say about economies that get a great injection of aid money, that it is often said that that weakens the social structure and the economic structure and drives indeed small providers out of business.
Hmm.
Um, I guess that's one of the things that you're trying to work against.
Exactly. And there's been, we also had the explosion a year and a half ago now, and after that, this was the port explosion in Beirut, and there was a lot of aid that keeps coming in, and that's how the people kind of survive. No, it's the remittances, it's the assistances. IMF is coming in now. There's going to be, yeah, undoubtedly a period of austerity. And so, yeah, within these kind of structures, if you keep your relationship with folks around you as sort of a donor and recipient kind of relationship, you are not challenging the economic order at large. You're not you're not building real solidarity, because what does solidarity mean? How do we understand it? It means that folks come together to take a shared risk, to say, okay, I'm going to put whatever abilities I have on the table, and you put whatever abilities you have. It doesn't have to match mine, and it doesn't have to influence our individual power within this collective. We're going to pool our resources and our intelligence and our abilities and our money together, and we're going to try and do something where everybody benefits. Because the model where I benefit from social capital because I go and help people and I post a photo on social media, that's also exploitation. That's still anti the spirit of cooperatives.
Mm. Do you think it's better at delivering direct grassroots support than larger and different kinds of operation?
For sure. Because it builds relationships, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so your cooperative at the moment basically handles food and domestic products, but there's a lot of talk at the moment about changing the economic model. This has actually been going on since the global financial crash more than a decade ago. You've talked a lot about the problems that you have with the cooperative, but there's obviously a lot of potential there as well. Do you see it potentially, this model being able to be used in other aspects of the economy as well as simply domestic products?
For sure. And there's been a lot of initiatives here. I'll give a few examples. The Beirut hostel, for example, that was a business that kind of stopped running after COVID, and a small bunch of people who've worked in the service industry took it over, and now they're running it as a cooperative, also facing a bunch of challenges, but that's a good example of a business that tried to close that's now a co-op. I'm part of a facilitation cooperative. We've been trying to support also workers' cooperatives in unemployment numbers because they're very high. And also, I think we've been turning a lot of attention to the gig economy, because we've noticed also that these corporations come in and sort of overtake any national laws, Ministry of Labor laws, sort of unions. There was a big protest yesterday against a car driving application, a taxi application by drivers here, saying that it's not fair, it puts them at a disadvantage. And so we've also started to think about platform economies and what's going to happen with gig work and then automation. What's gonna happen to the classical idea of labor rights?
Hmm.
I don't think we can think of this new surveillance capitalism phase that we're in the same terms that we used to think about, more classical capitalism, the way we understand it. So my parents' generation, they worked in the same job for 40, 50 years. They retired, they got pensions. Now in Lebanon, their pensions are worth pennies. My generation, we hop from job to job all the time. So you spend, 3 to 5 years in a job and then you move on to something else. For the next generation, it's going to be gig work. It's not, I'm not speculating. This is what everything points to.
Yeah.
So it's going to be gig work, it's going to be precarious, it's going to be exploitative in new forms, facilitated by technological changes. And our cooperative movement has to sort of live up to this challenge. We have to think about it now.
So new ways of working being supported by other kinds of new economic model. Although in fact the cooperative system is a very old economic model, but perhaps one should say a reborn economic model.
Yes, for sure. And readapted to how the means of production and the forms of organizing labor relations, these are changing. And so we have to change. I mean, the spirit of cooperatives, the principles, these don't change. No, these are, the we understand them to be democratic governance and sharing of profit. These are the two main principles. I personally think the other five need a bit of updating because they're 200 years old now. But the spirit of it is that people can work free from exploitation. And if the exploitation today is mediated by these Silicon Valley corporations that are built on an invasion of privacy, an invasion of rights, how do we think of cooperatives in this era? And I encourage folks to visit platform.coop, which is a consortium of people today thinking about these questions.
Well, that's a great note to leave it on. Nadine Mouawad, thank you so much for joining us today and telling us about the cooperative in Lebanon, new forms of economic activity to match new forms of work today. And if you want to find out more about Nadine's work, please visit the podcast webpage on the ILO website. You'll find some links and other information there. So for now, let me wish you all goodbye. Please join us again soon for another edition of the ILO's Future of Work podcast.